So we're going to start off in the boxing world. It was the last ever Top Rank on ESPN show, and this was at Madison Square Garden, the theater. And before we get into the fights and the co-features, I just want to touch on what I just opened with it being the last ever show on cable network now, which I think may be the first time in over 40 plus years where we won't currently have boxing on a cable network. And my take on it, Bud, is that for me it's maybe more personal than some others. For many years, starting in 1997, you were on Friday Night Fights, and it was an amazing show. And for the real fight fans, and to get real fights and the right matchups, and not just mismatches, but for the real hardcore boxing fans. And I think that you guys allowed, by doing that, the outlet to be there for other people to come in later, whether it was PBC or whether it was ESPN Top Rank. And with that being said, it's been a disappointment, to say the least. And 7 years now with ESPN Top Rank, we've had nothing but tremendous mismatches. We've had nothing but fighters and undercards that we knew had no chance to win the fight. We also had dragged out segments, and to me, we lost the mold of what boxing was supposed to be on the cable network. It wasn't about the fans anymore. It was about the money. And it felt like the money was stolen from ESPN and the time and the hours were stolen from the fans. And I know it's a sad day for a lot of boxing fans, but I was very sad when this news happened for HBO. I look at this as more of a celebration because of the things I said and where the sport was heading under this Top Rank banner, in my opinion, on ESPN. I just want to have your take before we get into the fights, the long run, ESPN, Top Rank, coming to a close, 7 years. Just want to hear your thoughts, bud.
Yeah, but I understand. Listen, there'll be a lot of people that will agree, I'm sure, and there'll be a lot of people that will disagree, I'm very sure. You know, that Top Rank has been a staple in boxing, on the networks, on the airwaves, I should say, for so many years. And, they've been one of the prominent promotional companies out there. Um, but I can't argue. I can't argue with the genesis of where, how you traced it. I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, Top Rank was ESPN boxing. I mean, it was ESPN. ESPN had just, it was a beginning network, a fledgling network that was getting its feet on the ground. All sports network, first time ever, and pioneers, breaking new ground, the whole thing. And boxing was a big part of what they did. I mean, it was the main. I would say it was probably one of the mainstays in their programming. And for all those years, from the 80s, like I said, 79, 80, whatever it was, to about 96, 90, 97, when we took over, when all of a sudden they decided to go with Friday Night Fights, which was me, Bob Papa, Brian Kenny, and Max Kellerman, the original four. And when we did that, you're right. I mean, on ESPN, it revigorated, the people, the Friday Night Fights, the whole idea, it was new energy. Top Rank had worn out its welcome, quite frankly, in the 80s and 90s. It got to become a place where it was a farm system for Top Rank. And that's not good. I mean, it's good if you're New York Yankees. That's great. You're bringing them up. But and then you bring them to the big leagues. But if you're boxing on a network, on in this case a cable network, and you're using it as a farm system just to build up fighters, well, you're doing that. You're putting them in, as you touched on, you're putting them in with subpar competition to build them up. And when you get almost 20 years of that, it becomes scorched earth. You burn it out. And they burned it out. There was a reason why ESPN transitioned over to Friday Night Fights. They had to get some, either get rid of boxing or get something new, get something fresh, get something, that had that people would want to watch. No more of these one-sided fights where, again, you were just basically building up your stable of fighters so you could place them into spots, whether it was on HBO at the time, whether it was later on Showtime, into these bigger spots for world titles. But you used ESPN to build their resume, to build their records, to get them to that place. And you benefited, Top Rank benefited as a promotional company to a certain extent where they were able to build them up to where they could fit them into world title fights. But the sport and the fans suffered because, as I said, you were doing it where you were in with subpar opponents while you were building their records, their confidence, their skills. And that's the reason why, the executives at ESPN finally said no more. I guess it was really the fans that said no more, not the executives, to be honest. Because when the fans stopped watching, the executives had no, they had no alternative except to go in another direction. And then we had 18 years with Friday Night Fights. And it was a special time. It really was. And then PPC came in and replaced us. And then, of course, Top Rank came in the last 7 years. And here's the funny thing, and I'll finish this. I don't want to really talk about it any more than what was necessary. And I think it was necessary to do a little history lesson because there is a part of history that's being lost now. So I think that it was appropriate to go down the road. But the crazy thing was, I was going to say the funny thing, but there's nothing really funny about it, is the last 7 years when they went back to Top Rank, the same company they had left, for the reason they had left, they did the same thing. They used it as a farm system to sign up the Olympians, to sign up, all the top amateurs, to use the money that they were getting from ESPN, or some of it at least, to sign up all these guys and put them on, cable TV every week. But the problem was the same as it was back in the 80s and the 90s, that you put them for the first 2 years while you were building their resume, while you were trying to make them to the point where they could become world champions, you were putting them in there with subpar opponents. And for the most part, we were getting a lot of one-sided fights. No matter how hard sometimes the people that are paid to talk, and I'm not even talking about the commentators, I'm talking about the sideline commentators, not even, not the color analysts, those guys. I'm talking about the sideline guys that are giving you the stories, that are coloring the picture. They sometimes colored a picture that was much more colorful than it really was. That, how great. But meantime, the only thing great about it was the greatness of the mismatches, of how they would shine during these mismatches. Yeah, they were talented kids. Yeah, some of them became world champions. But the way that they were painted, the way they were blown up, fans aren't dumb. They're really not. At some point, they're saying, "Hey, yeah, these guys are talented. They're gold medalists, they're silver medalists, they're national champions." But don't tell us that they're Sugar Ray Robinson because they're fighting a guy that shouldn't even be in the ring with them, and that they look insane. Let me see them with somebody before you start coloring them with those kind of words and just tremendous, obviously compliments. So at the end of the day, I think it lost I think between that and the fights that were one-sided, their program, their product lost credibility. It lost credibility. The people weren't going to put it on every Saturday night or Friday night, for the most part Saturday night, and say, yeah, I'm going to sit down. I'm ready to commit a couple hours to real good fights. The credibility had been taken away for that. So now you got to be concerned. You said it. There's no more traditional cable boxing right now. It's with ESPN stopping the deal with Top Rank and telling Top Rank, basically no mas. There is none on TV. Now, we'll see if ESPN hooks up with some other partners and goes into another direction with boxing. We hope they do. You'd hate to see ESPN, out of the business. It would hurt the sport. It would hurt the fans. But again, just like HBO, went away, Showtime went away, now ESPN going away. You gotta be a little concerned.
Absolutely. And to wrap it up there, just one last thing to piggyback, and I want to say off of that. You nailed it. I mean, the fans are not dumb. And the fans, they did lose credibility. And it wasn't just because of the matchmaking. And I know you might not be happy that I'm going to say this, but the credibility is lost when you take an honest person who tells the truth and is an International Boxing Hall of Fame commentator and remove him to not tell your fans the truth, but instead tell them the narrative and the storytelling that we were replaced with. And we were cheated. And that person and that commentator is obviously you. And that, to me, was the first domino where they lost their credibility, and I knew exactly where this was heading. It wasn't for the fans. It wasn't for the fighters. It was about the money, and only the money. And anyway, I've said enough. I hope the fans out there, and I hope ESPN maybe will pivot. Maybe we could bring back Friday night fights. Maybe we could bring back those great memories and build up these grassroots fighters the way it was in the past. And even when it's not the most entertaining fight or the biggest matchup, that you're going to get an honest assessment of what is occurring and not what the promotion wants you to hear.
Listen, Bud, I know it's coming from your heart. There's no getting around it. You're a smart kid, but at the same time, it's a son speaking. And I understand the emotions. I understand the love with that. I appreciate it. There will be people that will say whatever. At the end of the day, I appreciate your thoughts. I think boxing will obviously always survive. There were good parts to the 7 years ESPN also had. I don't want to completely diminish that. And people think they were just punching the crap out of Top Rank because Top Rank has been an iconic brand. There was times in the last 7 years that they did give you some good fights. But I think there's no denying the erosion when it was there for everyone to see. When at the end of the day, the jury speaks, and the jury was the audience. They stopped watching, and when they stopped watching, just like back in the 80s and the 90s, when they stopped watching, the executives started paying attention. Even though they hadn't been paying attention maybe for a while, they started paying attention and saying, "Hey, we gotta change up here." So again, I appreciate your love. It hasn't been all bad for them, but you're a son speaking towards your father. I appreciate it. I love you. I appreciate all the fans out there. Let's get to work.